I'm Melissa Marquais with ProTech IT Group. And just to give you a little insight, we are a full service IT partner supporting organizations with everything from infrastructure to cloud to security and managed services. Obviously, my role focuses on marketing as head of marketing here and business development. So thank you all for joining us today. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Ed, for an introduction.
Thank you. I'm Ed Heichel. I'm one of the senior reps here for Arctic Wolf. I'm really here more than anything to bring you Mitch Wolf. That is his real name. We didn't make him change it. He's my sales engineer and will be doing leading most of the conversation today. I'm really here to add a little bit of color and a little bit of information to what people are seeing in the real world with some of these cyber aspects that we're going to talk about today. And with that, really, I'm going to send it to your main host here, Mitch Wolf.
I appreciate that, Ed. I'm going to go ahead and share screens and appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to hear a little bit about the topic at hand. Just confirming, can everyone see this PowerPoint intro slide? Sound good?
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, as Ed mentioned, I'm a systems engineer, a sales engineer for Arctic Wolf here. I support the Northeast team, and to make a long story short, Ed and I do a ton of business with law firms, specifically in New York. And in the context of this group, I really want to synthesize down some of the things that we frankly talk to people about every day, all day, into some actionable items that are actually relevant to your security roadmap and really where the cybersecurity landscape is as we move throughout 2026. I'm going to give a couple polls at a couple points, and there's a little bit of an ask the audience component. So look for those. I'll queue those up as they come in. I also want to be mindful of the chat, so I'll keep an eye on that. And if there's any questions, or if Melissa or Ed, you see any, feel free to jump in. And I want this to be as conversational as a webinar can be. So the first thing that I'll start talking about is, who is Arctic Wolf? Why should you listen to what we say? Why do we have any perspective on this? And the first thing is, I always like to open by saying a lot of people think, oh, Arctic Wolf, they're a security company. And we always kind of pause there, and we're very intentional about this. We always say, well, we're actually a security operations company. And there's a big difference there compared to the vast majority of our competitors and the vast majority of the nearly 4,000 cybersecurity tool vendors out there. We're very cognizant of how the tools and the attack surface and your management of that attack surface is actually put into practice, right? What actually happens when rubber meets the road? If you heard us talking a little bit before this webinar started, Ed was talking about race cars. It's a perfect transition. You can build a $6 million Formula One car, but when it bumps into the side of the wall, or when there's a little bit of chatter on that rubber pad, when you're going into turn 5, that's when you find out how secure you really are. So we have over 10,000 customers. One of our biggest verticals that we actually cover is legal firms. But what really matters, what's the engineering spin on this? We see over 10 trillion events per week. So the way our data lake is architected, we have an enormous amount of data coming in each week. And we have an entire separate team that's called Arctic Wolf Labs, which I'll talk a little bit more in a second about. But Arctic Wolf Labs is our threat intelligence division. And I really want to highlight that they're a division. A lot of our competitors might have some kind of a threat intelligence component, but really at the end of the day, it's the side hustle, it's the hobby, it's kind of the pet project of that SOC or that engineering team. We take that so seriously as part of the proactive operational warning system that we have for customers, that we have an entire division whose sole purpose is taking those 10 trillion events and synthesizing down actionable understanding. So we can get really rapid at how we're doing that. So for example, we're not just updating our threat intel, on a quarter by quarter or a, year to year basis. We can literally see how attack vectors and bad actors are changing behavior, getting down into the week by week, day by day, frankly, minute by minute aspect. And we can change the rule sets and parameters that benefit all of our customers accordingly. On top of that, one of the things that we're going to be talking a little bit about is the IR team. So we also have a separate incident response team. So we do over 1,500 IR engagements per year. These are non-Arctic Wolf customers that have unfortunately had that worst day of their career. They have panicked. They call oftentimes their cyber insurance provider, and that cyber insurance provider puts them in contact with us because we are a really well-known entity in the cyber insurance world. So when you take those two combinations together, we're able to basically say, hey, we have a good understanding of the cybersecurity landscape. We understand where non-Arctic Wolf customers are having breaches, having problems, and there's a couple of things that we do off of that. So again, Arctic Wolf Labs, separate division that is actually synthesizing down these actionable ideas. And then as part of that operations component, when you take our core service of MDR, for example, typically what MDR is in the marketplace is a customer can hire a mercenary, and that mercenary is going to be their MDR, their XDR, their ABCDR provider. And you basically are hiring someone to help you play a never-ending game of whack-a-mole. At Arctic Wolf, really the ultimate version of even our core MDR service, in addition to all the proactive services that we have, the ultimate version of MDR for us is that before a bad actor can even knock on your door, we're proactively alerting and saying, hey, based on what we know about your environment, you have tool set XYZ. We've seen a vulnerability come out. It might not even be published yet, is how fast we can actually go. You're not on fire yet, but we want to make you aware of this, and let's do something to actually positively harden your posture in case you're somewhere on that bad actors list for that day or that week or whatever it might be. Again, taking that bulk telemetry and then synthesizing that down, we're able to come out with a couple of different reports, and that's really what I want to focus on today. When you take a look at who these bad actors and these attackers are, I really like this one. This is around Akira, which is a ransomware group that you may have heard of. Bad actors today, it is no longer, I kind of make the joke, it's no longer two 15-year-old savants in their parents' basements that are These bad actors today, they are really organized groups, right? They operate like a company. Some of them, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. Some of them even have like HR departments where one of the hackers submits PTO to go on vacation with their family. So the idea behind this is that they are methodical, they are iterative, they reinvent themselves, they have a cohesive strategy. So when you're dealing with groups like that, they have very robust playbooks. So if they get into an environment or they do recon on an environment and they find out that you have a best-in-class EDR, for example, they are not going to throw up their hands and give up and say, oh, they have a great EDR, I'm stymied, right? No, they're going to flip to page 4 of their attack handbook, and based on who that actual EDR vendor is, that'll tell them a lot about what your tech stack and what your defenses typically look like. So for example, if they run into an organization that has a best-in-class EDR, but it's one of the EDR-centric vendors, that might tip the bad actor off, and they might know that these people probably aren't watching their network. They might have a firewall, but we can get past the firewall. So maybe they do like a network-based attack that leads them to a low and slow MFA fatigue attack, because organizations that are solely relying on EDR, they might not be watching their MFA, especially if it's low and slow. And then that leads them into a fraudulent fund transfer by getting access to, for example, your email in O365. That type of an attack vector is very savvy, but it's because that bad actor knows how to piece together what the recon clues are, and then they're coordinating across a vast network of other hackers at that same organization. And they know how to actually transition attack vectors very quickly before the defenders, before the people that I'm speaking to on this call can really even see them or set up blocks in coordination. At Arctic Wolf, if there's one thing to take away, it's that we cover the entire broad attack surface. And that's a really key point. It brings up the principle that I really like to stress is defense in depth. So the idea is that when you look at a real world attack chain, we're able to get human eyes on glass significantly earlier in attack chains than people that are just trying to patchwork together what I would call a traditionally, disparate group of data silos. And then it's on you or it's on your MDR provider or some equivalent of that to try to link together in real time what all these disparate tools are telling you. So I'm going to start off with a question here, and I'm going to ask the audience, I think I can just queue up this poll here, but who here in the audience has MFA today at their organization? So raise your hand if you have multi-factor authentication. Awesome. So I love asking this question because it's actually a multi-part question. Looks like everyone voted yes, which is fantastic to hear. Full disclosure, Ed and I, we talk to people, Melissa and I talk to people that do not have MFA implemented. So that is fantastic. That is such a linchpin into your environment. I'm going to take this question and bring it one step further, though. Can you guarantee that upon investigation or audit by a cyber insurance provider in case of a breach, knock on wood, that you've deployed MFA anywhere and everywhere that you can? Appreciate everyone's candor on this. We actually have about a 60-40 split right now, and that's totally fine. This is not uncommon. I oftentimes ask groups this same cadence of questions. And the reason that I like to bring this up is because when you look at the cyber insurance providers, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that cyber insurance providers are incentivized to not pay out on claims, right? They're like any insurance provider. So this is kind of a sad story, but again, Melissa and Ed and I, we talk to people all the time that have had scenarios like this. And what I would say is that a lot of organizations, they have MFA for them and their security team. And that's fantastic. You should. But if and when a breach occurs, the microscope that you will be under when your cyber insurance provider actually looks into the fact that on that cybersecurity audit 9 months ago, you check the box yes, they will get you for that. And they will say, hey, you don't have MFA. MFA to us in the cyber insurance world is all or nothing. So this really brings me to this point here. 52% of organizations actually identified one or more breaches in the last year. Now those could range from major to minor. What we really see at Arctic Wolf is what we call the effectiveness gap. And it's the idea that people are spending more and more each year. It's really a linear trajectory of how much defenders are spending to actually defend and implement tools and on their cybersecurity practice in general. But these losses are gaining at an exponential rate. And that delta in between those two lines is what we call the effectiveness gap. And that's only being exaggerated by the fact that the control groups and the people that are putting their money where their mouth is, like your trusted partners in the cyber insurance world, they are now looking at is what you're attesting to matching up with practice. So again, I appreciate everyone voting on that, but this is very typical. I oftentimes say, hey, who has MFA? And almost everyone's hand goes up. But then I ask that second part as if I was a cyber insurance provider. A lot of hands go down, and that's okay. That's something that we can help you with at Arctic Wolf. But I will say 56% of organizations that experienced a significant cyber attack had not implemented MFA. And the sad truth is that 56%, assuming they have cyber insurance, assuming they went to make that claim, they are going to be denied. If the MFA had anything to do with that cyber attack, they're going to be denied. So I'm not saying all this to implement or to instill fear or anything like that, but I just want to understand and kind of lay the groundwork of how serious this situation is at Arctic Wolf and the sometimes very sad scenarios that we see each day. But again, we're a services company, we're an operations company. We've implemented all these ways to actually help defend people in terms of posture, and we'll get into that in a moment. So vulnerabilities and insurability. We like to think of the stages of cybersecurity maturity as really 5 stages, and I'll go ahead and just build this out. But the idea is that at stage 1, you have tools, right? You have a firewall, you have MFA, you have some kind of an EDR, typically maybe an email filter, but you're really self-managing those. So the natural progression is that as you move into stage 2, organizations have said, hey, let's get some help. And that typically means going to that first party vendor and getting some kind of a service layered on top. So maybe you have the person there, the logo that is selling you your firewall, they're actually implementing, some kind of a service to help you manage it. Really getting into stage 3, that's where you get into this idea of broad detection and response. So the good thing is that to some degree, you are looking holistically at the attack surface. Ideally, with organizations that are partnered with Arctic Wolf, we cover the entire attack surface, and you have native integrations, and there's some things that actually triangulate and cross-correlate those disparate data points. But that's some form of MDR, XDR, ABCDR. That's fantastic, but the problem there is it's very reactive, right? It's right of boom. It's the acute blocking and tackling and kung fu of alerts as they pop up, right? That never-ending game of whack-a-mole. Like I said, we've put what I would argue is the most proactive, preemptive spin on MDR, but that's really the industry standard definition. When you get into stage 4, that's really when you're talking about the vulnerability scanning, tabletop exercises, pen testing, and then really the awareness training, looking at left of boom. And then at stage 5, that's when you're actually adhering to some kind of a best practice framework. So we're going to talk about a couple of these here, specifically about the adherence to the framework. That's what the demo at the end is actually going to be about. And then we're also going to talk about how the cyber insurance companies are actually diving into that vulnerability training, that left of boom activity. That's when they profile your risk as a firm, that's how they're actually looking at this. Just know that Arctic Wolf wants to, right size and meet you where you're at. So we have services that match up with each of these stages. But the other thing that I always say is, I understand how daunting this can look if you feel like you're at stage 2 or at stage 1. The idea here is that for a very, very low lift in terms of time and effort, we can slingshot you very quickly, for example, from stage 2 to stage 4, or even from stage 1 to stage 4. And that's what we do with organizations every day. And I'm happy to talk more about that or answer some questions at the end. There's really 3 types of cyber attacks that make up the vast majority. So I'll start off and I'll ask this in the background as I talk about this. But are you currently proactively managing vulnerabilities across your attack surface? Almost all of the attacks that are successful that we see at Arctic Wolf fall into 3 categories. So there's ransomware, there's data exfiltration, and then there's business email compromise. As I look at this, I'm seeing some of the responses pull in. So I'm glad to see that most people are doing some kind of a management exercise, sometimes with a cooperative team on the outside, sometimes they're self-managing it. One of the things that this leads me into that I'd like to talk a little bit about is this. And this is kind of a cold scenario here, but so often when Ed and I talk to organizations that have had a successful ransomware attack, for example, we find out that, even in the year here, 2026, when they reveal to us what the CVE that was their downfall, it's so often in the ransomware and data exfiltration world is a CVE that has a remarkably old year on it. So we'll talk to people at the start of 2026 here and they say, yeah, we had actually, the Citrix NetScaler vulnerability. And if you notice on the screen here over on the right-hand side, that's a CVE from back in 2023. One of the downfalls of self-managing your own tools is that it's very hard to get insight across your attack surface. Maybe you're using like Microsoft, for example, and that's fantastic. It has a lot of capabilities. But when it comes to non-Microsoft components, for example, like Citrix NetScaler or your firewall, it has some limited insight into that. And on top of that, a lot of organizations are just struggling to even surface those vulnerabilities. So when you're looking for a vulnerability management tool or provider, or in our case, a service, I really want to stress the idea that there is someone in the background running these scans, not just consistently, but also helping you as the customer, whether it's a tool or whether it's a service like us. Someone is actually helping you make a cohesive game plan to make actionable progress on your vulnerabilities. It's one thing to have them identified in a dashboard buried 10 pages down. It's another thing to step in and say, hey, out of all these vulnerabilities, let's make an actionable game plan and say, yes, you have 100 vulnerabilities. That's not great, but there's 25 of them that are high priority. because they have a known CISA-KEV score, for example. So they've been exploited in the wild. We know that. They're on an externally facing part of your environment. That's another big piece. And then 2, they're in an area where a bad actor is likely to look. And with our threat intelligence component, we're able to do that. So the key takeaways that I'd really say is that, again, prioritizing patching can prevent intrusion. I think we're actually doing a very good job as a cybersecurity world right now of the need to monitor and kind of that MDR idea. You can argue about who's doing it best or what the best technique is there. But I think we're lacking in our actual vulnerability management aspect. The other thing I want to mention, I talked about a little bit ago, is that ransomware, especially today, is really the modern day Hydra. So the FBI or Interpol or some kind of a law enforcement group, they might go after a single group. They might get some of them, but because of the transnational component, because of the cross-border component, it's going to rear its ugly head in a different way. So you need to have some kind of a comprehensive solution. And that's one of the things that we do at Arctic Wolf. I'll leave this up, and if anyone wants this, I might send this as a takeaway, but we actually, as part of our threat intelligence division, we've actually asked cyber insurance brokers, or I should say providers, what their actuaries are actually looking for. So this is ranking out the 3 top things that those actuaries are actually ranking in the context of what can we do to prevent cyber attacks? What can we do to lower our risk profile? I'm happy to talk more about these, but I kind of make this joke, at Arctic Wolf right now, RSA is going on. So we have a massive presence at RSA right now. I encourage anyone to go look at some of the things that we're debuting in terms of the agentic SOC and our super intelligence platform. It's a really seismic shift in our market messaging. At the same time, it's really about the fundamentals. So Ed and I will talk to people all the time. They want to hear about AI, and I'm happy to talk to them about how AI is being used by bad actors, how AI is helping defenders like Arctic Wolf with these deep learning models and the access to that data lake that we've developed over the past 14 years. But at the same time, then I sometimes ask those people, well, what are you using for EDR? And they say, we don't have an EDR, right? So I said, I would love to talk to you about AI and quantum computing and all of that, but let's make sure the fundamentals are checked off. So cyber risk, beyond insurance, we're going to talk a little bit about IR retainers, warranties, and tabletop exercises. And I'm going to actually tag team Ed in a little bit here. But the first question that I just want to ask to kind of do a temp check of everyone in the room is, does your firm have an IR plan that is up to date? And the definition of an IR plan that is up to date is something that has been conscientiously reviewed in the past 6 months. Thanks for your votes, everyone. Looks like we're sitting at about, so it's great to hear that you guys do have IR plans. I think that the no category, what we oftentimes hear is that people have IR plans, but they haven't been looked at recently. So one of the things that we do at Arctic Wolf is with our IR planning engagements that Ed is going to be talking a little bit. I'm going to have him jump in a little bit. One of the things that he's going to be talking about is that we are keeping it top of mind for you. And we have a number of what I would call, micro components to it, like the tabletop exercises that's keeping that IR plan top of mind for you. An IR plan is only as good as how recently it's been updated. And again, I understand when you're spinning many plates, I'm speaking as a practitioner here. When you're spinning a lot of plates, you might have an IR plan, but it's 3 years old and 4 out of the 5 people on it no longer work at the organization. We see that all the time. So we've really been conscientious about how we've designed these IR plans. I'll maybe just touch on this slide, Ed, but more and more organizations of all sizes are creating IR plans. This is something that is also being asked for by cyber insurance companies. So this is a control thing. For example, if anyone in this audience is in New York, for example, the New York DFS controls that are now in effect, this is something that they are aiming to have even small organizations, small by their definition, have some kind of an IR plan. Sadly, a lot of organizations are using that plan more and more, again, as that effectiveness gap is only increasing, and people have a lot of near misses And that's something that Ed will talk a little bit about as well. Ed, I'll let you speak.
Yeah, I'm going to hit two things thank you, Mitch. I'll give you a second to catch your breath. I'm going to really talk about two pieces within here because we're seeing more and more movement within IR and really the IR market changing. One of the biggest things that we're seeing for a lot of folks is that, again, as Mitch kind of talked about, is they'll have their IR plan and it won't be necessarily updated. There's going to be two main things, and at the top of it, you'll see the idea of the cyber assessment tool. The cyber assessment tool really runs into the idea of a cyber resilience assessment. Part of the things that Arctic Wolf does is we have our tool that we allow you to use, and Mitch is going to highlight this in the end here in just a minute, but we also have a team that goes through with you and helps you do the actual planning to make sure that everything is brought up to date and that things aren't missed. Those 1,500 cases, if you kind of, hopefully it jogs your memory back into the beginning, those 1,500 IR cases that we do for non-Arctic Wolf customers through our IR team, one of the things that's most common with it is that everybody has the IR plan set up, and as we come in to help them out and negotiate with the cyber criminals and do the forensics and do the containment and all those things that you would expect the IR team to do, one of the things that we do is we go through and review, okay, where was your IR plan with it? Almost all of them, there are huge discrepancies from where the written IR plan was and where the reality of today is. So one of the big things we look at is trying to make sure that we help you improve that IR plan. The other thing that goes on is a lot of people with IR retainers, they have an IR retainer, they put in a big block of money, and then the money goes away at the end of it, and they go, what do we do now? As we look at this, Arctic Wolf has a covered incident in it, but we also go through and we are doing tabletop exercises. And Mitch, if you want to shuffle to the table, thank you.
Yeah.
The tabletop exercise, I can't stress for you, and I don't know how many people, and I apologize, I don't have a poll set up for it, but I don't know how many people on the channel here are doing an annual tabletop. For a lot of people, they are doing it with their insurance companies, or they're doing it with their legal, and they are 3-year-old scenarios, they are pie in the sky scenarios of a tabletop, but also to review real quick for everybody, because tabletop sometimes means different things to different people. With Arctic Wolf, with a tabletop exercise, we literally go through and we bring in your team, we bring in your IT team, we bring in your C-level, your legal, your everybody like that, and we bring them all in, and we basically go through and run through a scenario that we're looking at and go, here's what happens in a real world scenario. Where do we get the real world scenarios? A lot of the legal people who are doing tabletops make them up. A lot of the insurance companies are looking at a case from 3 years ago. We are looking at a case that we are constantly updating our tabletops, and we're looking at a case that for somebody a month and a half ago who had a bad day. We're also going through and with, we've talked a lot about legal, but Arctic Wolf is in legal, finance, manufacturing, government, nonprofit. We're in all kinds of businesses. We have IR cases from all kinds of businesses. So it's something too where we do a specific one that's on your industry. We of course are changing it so you don't know what company it was, but we're making it a real world scenario that happened recently. I can't stress enough that with these tabletops how important that piece is, and I also really want to stress the idea that this is a really good way to help your team get a better vision and a better sense as to why cybersecurity is so important, and what you and your team, and I know that I say you and your team, and I don't know completely if we're talking to CIO, IT directors, CEOs. I'm not sure what level we have everybody in the room. But regardless of what level we're talking to in the room today, that your team or that your IT spend within the company is well spent. And this tabletop exercise that we do helps expose how important that piece is. So as Mitch moves on to talk about the cyber assessment and to talk about that piece, the tabletop is almost the other end of it. And the reason I want to just reiterate and spend a tiny bit of time on it is that it is the unfortunate result for people of a cyber attack. This gives you the ability to, I'm going to say, enjoy or see the unfortunate result without having it actually happen to your organization. So really strong piece in there. We would love to be able to talk with you about it further. I'm going to say one last thing about this tabletop. If Mitch, go back to those 3 section pieces, 2 slides back for 1 second.
There you go.
If you would, thank you. One more back if you could. Thank you so much. Arctic Wolf, when we do our IR 360 plus, we do a full covered incident. We do a cyber resilient assessment. We do IR planning, and we do tabletop. And we are delivering that to our customers for often less than what most people are paying for a tabletop alone. Why do it for so much less, Ed? That's a great question. The reason is because as we're doing this, it's usually a very good indicator for people to look at their security and go, we have gaps. Okay, great. We want to be able to help you assess those gaps and be able to work through them. So it's a big piece for it. The very last thing just to say is just to reiterate back to that very first slide that Mitch brought up, those 1,500 cases for non-Arctic Wolf customers that we're doing every year. We are taking those forensics, we're taking that information, and of course, following all the privacy laws and everything like that, but we're taking that information and we're going, and this is nothing wrong with this tool as I say it, I'm just using it as an example. We're going, ABC company, we just helped them clean it. We're in the active process of helping them clean up a breach. It occurred on a Palo Alto firewall. Palo Alto firewalls are great, nothing wrong with them. It occurred on a Palo Alto firewall, and we immediately go and we feed that back into our platform. We look at our 10,000 plus customers and we go, who had a Palo Alto firewall? Great. Who had this model of it? Fantastic. Who had this patch of it? Fantastic. And we whittle that down to a point where we get to the, our 1,300 customers that might be irrelevant to, and we immediately reach out to them and go, you're not on fire. Somebody else is, and you could be the next one on the block for it. All of these things and everything Arctic Wolf does feeds in a circular fashion. All right, I'm going to be quiet because you want to talk to the engineer, not me. And thank you guys for the second. Maybe I'm going to say one thing on here too, because Mitch has just popped to this. It's all, anybody who says we can take care of everything is crazy. It's all about helping you mitigate your risk. Arctic Wolf helps you mitigate your risk through the tools and the purpose-built technology, but also with one of the most robust security operations warranties. Again, because we cover companies on a holistic basis, there isn't the ability for something to get missed. And then I make this one other joke. Our cyber operations warranty is complete. It doesn't just, and I love analogies, baseball gets thrown through the window. The window is broken. For a lot of cybersecurity warranties that are out there, they cover the broken window, and that's great. But what about the fact that the baseball came through the window, it hit the vase, it knocked the vase over, it dumped water on the floor, and now I've got a broken vase and I've got water damage inside the building. Arctic Wolf not only covers the actual break fix, but we cover legality, we cover media coverage, we cover business interruption, all of these different things within a security operations warranty to help you truly not only mitigate that risk with the positive things we're going to do on the front end, but transfer away the remaining risk factor to really help you look at solving total risk. Now I'm really going to be quiet, Mitch. Sorry.
Appreciate the context, Ed. So before I jump into our demo, I'm going to ask a couple different things. The first is, out of people on this call, are you guys mapping to any kind of a NIST or CIS or New York DFS or any of these best practice frameworks? Is there any conscientious effort at your firm? Awesome. So I love what I'm seeing here. It sounds like NIST is the most common. So I'm actually going to go with NIST for what I'm about to demo for everyone. I asked about New York DFS. I mentioned that, I kind of name dropped it a little bit ago. What we've really found at Arctic Wolf is that the New York DFS controls have really changed how organizations, big and small, are looking at what their security roadmap does. And what I'm about to show you with the cyber resilience assessment is really our formalization of the idea that Arctic Wolf has always been mapping to NIST and CIS. That has been inherent in our vision and what we do going back 14 years. On the flip side, I would admit that we probably were not as explicit about that to customers as we should have been at the time. So the CRA is really a value add service, and there's a way that you can actually access the CRA without being an Arctic Wolf customer, and ProTech can help you with that. So I'm going to go ahead and transition to that in a moment here. I'm going to stop sharing. Appreciate everyone voting on this. And let me go ahead and pull up my demo environment.
I'm going to say one thing really quick because I know that we have some folks that are not within New York. Mitch and I have mentioned New York DFS quite a few times. We're the New York team. There are teams all across the country. And one of the big things that Arctic Wolf is very big on with our sales teams is making sure that we are very aware of the local regulations, the local things like New York DFS. Where there is a New York DFS, there is also a Arizona DFS, Department of Financial Services as well. And the local Arizona team, of course, is an expert in that, can help you with that if somebody's out of Arizona. Sorry, thanks, Mitch.
Yeah, great point, Ed. So the background, I am going to start this poll. And I mentioned a second ago that, this is the formalization of not only were customers coming to Arctic Wolf and asking, not only were customers asking how we map or what we're mapping to, they were coming to us and explaining that they were struggling themselves to map to NIST and CIS. So often we found, and I've actually been there before, everyone wants to map to best practice frameworks, but when the rubber meets the road, again, to use that analogy, it becomes a grimy, messy, arduous process with an Excel spreadsheet, and there's a burst of energy at the start, and then everyone forgets about it, and then you try to come revisit it, and there's a bunch of tech debt. I've been there, I understand that process. So customers came to Arctic Wolf, and we said, well, we've always been mapping to NIST and CIS. Why don't we formalize that out? You're looking at the cyber resilience assessment in our unified dashboard. So if anyone on this call has seen Arctic Wolf before, this is another page on the dashboard. But again, I want to stress this is a value add. So regardless of what Arctic Wolf services you sign up for, a single one or all of them, you would have access to this. ProTech is such a great partner of ours, and I just want to make this point here. I threw up this $100 Uber Eats gift card poll. If you're interested in this, there is a way to get free access to this tool for 90 days. And ProTech can actually help you go through. And I do not want to minimize how much work it is to fill out all of these columns. And I have this tuned to NIST 2.0 right now in response to the poll results. But at the same time, even if you picked a few of these control groups that I'm highlighting here with my mouse, it might be a good idea to just go through them and see, hey, with that North Star, with our alignment to that North Star of, in this case, NIST 2.0, how are we doing, even for one of the small ones? They can get access for you, and that can be a cooperative exercise. Again, Ed and I would love to join, or another Arctic Wolf team would be happy to join that call. But if not, we could join on a future call. We want this to be something that can evangelize the market towards the ability to have this in a centralized location that is professional. And then I'll talk a little bit at the end here about some of the actionable results that come out of this, not the least of which is really, really serious real dollar savings at the end of this when you factor in, for example, like our cyber insurance alliances team, which I'll talk about as well. So NIST, CIS, these are best practice frameworks that really represent different control groups agnostic to the underlying logo and how you're actually implementing the policy and procedure that affects those logos. I'll do a really quick example here. This is our demo environment. So this is an example of an organization whose credit score is sitting at about 650 right now. I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to go to this products category. And this is going to pull up all of the products that make up NIST 2.0. There's a ton on here, but I'm going to just use a simple example to start off with. Let's say you currently have Trend Micro for your email filter, right? But you're thinking about moving to, I'm just going to say abnormal security as an example. So let's say that you're thinking about moving off of Trend Micro and you want to move to abnormal. That's great. We can use this to paint kind of an art of the possible. So I've selected abnormal security. I'm going to hit save. And if you notice, none of these numbers have changed at all. So again, that's the idea that NIST is not looking at, do you have a best-in-class logo? It's looking at how are you leveraging the logo in terms of policy and procedure. So I'll go ahead and build these out and talk for a moment here. You know, I always make the argument, like Ed was just saying, Palo Altos are fantastic, right? But a third-class firewall tuned and monitored correctly is better than a first pass or a first-tier logo firewall right out of the box. So again, this is a simple example, but for email filter, there's really two of these elements that make up the email filter product category. So again, art of the possible. Let's say that you want to put some effort towards this. You'd like to maybe acquire Abnormal or any of the different logos that you saw on my last screen. Let's say, hey, we really want to put a concentrated effort here. For this, networks and email filter services are monitored to find potentially adverse effects or events. We're going to approve and communicate this out to our entire organization. And then at the organization, we're going to implement this everywhere, not just on the admin users, not just on the C-suite. We're gonna implement this even to our pesky remote users, right? And we're gonna do the same thing down here for this second element, which is monitoring runtime environments for potentially adverse events, right? Well, I've now kind of painted the art of the possible, kind of used this for some light market research, if you will, in terms of not just acquiring that new logo, but actually how I can leverage this logo and like what this effect will have. So when I scroll down here, we can now see the assessment impact, what our previous index was, and what the new index is. So when I click update assessment here, this is all going to tie back. And when I go to this main page, you're going to see, oh, somebody changed something in here. You're going to see that jump accordingly. So it'd be a 50-point jump in this case. The nice thing about this tool, and I think the paradigm shift that our customers have talked to us about, you know, when this first debuted, I'll be honest, I was in the cynical engineer category. And I said, yeah, this is cool. It's a great value add. I hope some people get some use out of it, but I don't really see like what kind of actionable results come out of it, right? What we found over the past year and a half is a lot of boots on the ground, you know, sysadmins, directors, actual users of these end-side tools are using this as budgets tighten to go to like the CFO for funding, for example, and they can now quantify what effect their efforts will have. So again, being a practitioner, I think that typically, you know, you go to your CFO and you say, hey, I want a bunch of money, and in 3 months, our email filter is going to be way better, right? That doesn't move the needle as budgets tighten, right? We all know going to the CFO and Mr. or Mrs. CFO say, that sounds great, but not this year. Well, now you can change this, and it's a paradigm shift where you can go and say, hey, based on working with Arctic Wolf and talking to them on the spiders and the security journey and all the posture management things that Arctic Wolf has been doing with me, and quantifying this out of this CRA assessment, I need, you know, $7,000 and 53 days, and that is going to get us a 75-point jump in our NIST 2.0 score. Now, that's great. It's fantastic to have that jump in your NIST score. It's good to have a jump in the NIST score just for the sake of security best practices. But what does the CFO care about? CFO cares about the money side, the dollars in, dollars out side of things. So when I scroll down here a little bit further, you'll notice there's an insurability rating here. And this is really cool because when you go back to that slide earlier in my presentation where I quantified out what those actuaries, what the cyber insurance companies have told us their actuaries are actually using to quantify your list or your risk profile, we have an insurability rating. So So this takes all the components of NIST or CIS, and this quantifies it into how would a cyber insurance company see this? And this can produce a very professional looking cyber insurability print off. This is a PDF. So this is for our sample company. Again, that's the demo environment company that we were just looking at. And this will now break out, here's the insurability breakdown. And I do apologize, someone in the background, one of the other engineers must have changed some of these controls. So this is a company that's only at 300 something on NIST, but this is going to bring out everything in your environment that the insurance company would care about. Now that's great, but how do you get the insurance company to notice this? Ed alluded to this a moment ago, but we have something, again, it's a value add team called the Cyber Insurance Alliances team. And this is something that I don't think anyone else in the industry is doing. But we have a team that is a value add that will actually join you on calls with your broker. And they will say, hey, Mitch and Ed Insurance Company, what are you actually underwriting this organization, right? It's not Mitch and Ed Insurance. Mitch and Ed is the broker, but the actual carrier in the background, maybe it's Scissure or Chubbs or Tokyo Marine or Beasley or Aon, whoever it may be. Well, based on this print off and based on our familiarity and relationships with the cyber insurance world, this is an organization that I'm representing here that has implemented Arctic Wolf managed detection and response, managed risk, and they have an incident response retainer with a tabletop exercise. Well, we know that based on that, if you're underwriting them Tokyo Marine, that's actually making them eligible for what we typically see is between an 18 and 24% decrease in their insurance premium. Or maybe it's better, more advantageous coverage. So these are real world dollars that you as a practitioner can actually quantify in here. Use the Cyber Insurance Alliances team with those maybe higher up. Maybe you have a chief risk officer or you have your internal, your general legal counsel that's actually typically having those conversations. Well, this affects you. So you can go into those conversations and kind of stake your claim and then use that, frankly, to help improve your posture with all the different series of posture improvement exercises that you could do with Arctic Wolf and implement with the ProTech team and their ability to actually do this at a granular level from a tool aspect. So the relationship between ProTech, us at Arctic Wolf, and the customer becomes really valuable, not just for the sake of security, because I know that I'm an engineer. I want you to have the best security just for the sake of having great security, but also at the all-important dollars and cents side that a CFO that is actually approving or negating all of these initiatives actually cares about. To give you a couple other examples, I'll maybe just say this and end with this, and then I'd love to pause for some questions, and I really appreciate everyone's time today. Maybe there's an organization that is sitting back and looking at this, and they're saying, hey, we're doing pretty well on this, authentication and access control series of groups. So we're actually doing pretty well here. But I'm really frustrated because, when I come in here and I click on, this one right here, there's a lot of meat left on this bone. So this is around monitoring, analyzing adverse events. If they come to us and they say to Arctic Wolf, their concierge security team, where you get 3 named individuals that get to know you, get to know your environment, they're above and beyond our SOC resources, and they say, hey, what can I do to actually improve this adverse event analysis piece? Well, that all ties back to the front of our conversation, the idea of those posture management engagements. So if you want to improve these, well, guess what? All of these elements tie back to our security focuses and our spiders. So I'll just pick one that's top of list here. Here's an Active Directory review. This is the temporal idea of what the journey is that you're going on. And then these are all the micro spiders where you would sit down cooperatively with ProTech and your concierge security team at Arctic Wolf, and you would do, for example, a review of Active Directory. I'll show you a quick example of this right now. Here's one around identity and lifecycle management,
10 seconds as you're saying this. You guys, I want to reiterate that while he's showing you a PDF on this, the PDF, if you were an Arctic Wolf customer, the PDF is generated off of your specific environment, not just a random PDF on Active Directory. It's on what do you actually have? How is yours actually tuned today? Sorry, Mitch. Thank you.
I want to tune in one thing too, also, if I may. When Mitch talks about, having ProTech run through this with you, I do want to remind you all that it's a complimentary session, so there's no out-of-pocket expense for that. We're happy to help you get set up with the tool. Not everybody put their phone number on the registration, and I saw 8 out of 8 people ask me to call them to help them get access to this tool. So I did drop my email in the chat, so please make sure that you send me a message so that I can reach you. And with that, I'll turn it back to Mitch.
Melissa, that's a great call. And again, we want everyone to use the free version of this. There's no constraints on the content. And we've talked at length about the benefits of this. Don't think of it as an arduous task. You can really microtize a small segment of it. And we've seen other organizations and other legal firms and all sorts of entities get great results from this. As Ed mentioned, I'm just pulling up this example of this spider. This is one that is actually tuned and based on that customer's data. So I don't want to give the misconception that this is Arctic Wolf just taking a PDF of best practices in general and sending them and saying, hey, congrats, good luck, go implement this. This is a cooperative, bespoke engagement tuned to your environment, the quirks of how you're using your tool set, and the outcomes, really the security hopes and dreams that you're hoping to gain. So again, I'll maybe end there and pause for any questions, but I really encourage everyone to utilize the offer here from ProTech. Again, Ed and I would be happy to be part of those conversations, but if you'd like to just do it privately with ProTech, again, this is an agnostic tool. You always make the joke, don't take Arctic Wolf's word for it, take NIST and CIS, because that's what this CRA actually represents. I'll check the chat here, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. And let me know if there's anything more that I can share or anything to add from Ed or Melissa. Awesome.
Well, I know that one of the main things is to try to engage in one-on-one conversation, and it looks like everybody's interested in talking further on that. So I'm going to call it a success then. We really want to. Well, I'll let you close it up, Melissa. But on behalf of Arctic Wolf, really want to thank you for giving Mitch and I some time and spending some time to learn. I can't. There's a lot of stuff going on with RSA right now. RSA is the big cyber conference. I'm sure probably everybody's aware of it. But one of the big highlights that I just want to leave everybody with as I kick it to Melissa, Arctic Wolf is now the largest. Or Mitch, you go ahead. You say it better than I do. I always get it a little wrong.
We debuted 2 things. So we are now the largest agentic SOC. We have always been the largest commercial SOC in terms of human eyes on glass. But we are currently, not in the future, this is not a 2027 roadmap, leveraging something that we call the superintelligence platform. I won't try to take 5 hours of content and jam it into 1 minute, but the way that we have actually designed our SOC moving forward, predicated and based on the vast experience we have of real world cyber defense over the past 14 years, we've really signaled a paradigm shift, I would say, in how an MDR and cybersecurity operations company should be defending you. If you have any interest in it, you can find it all over our webpage for the RSA announcements, or again, that would be something that maybe you work on this CRA with Melissa, with the ProTech team. Ed and I would be happy to come in for a subsequent call and talk a little bit about how this would be different from what you might be doing now. Melissa, I'll let you.
Everyone is trying to look at how they can, one of the main directives we hear from everybody is we want to use more AI, but we want to use it smartly and safely. Yes, and that is the big direction that Arctic Wolf has gone, but always going back to having that ground truth verification of humans within the organization, and it's a big difference. So let Melissa close this up here. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Ed, for taking the time to come and show everybody through this demo. I think I've seen this tool in action, and I've seen it uncover some major gaps for people that they didn't even know existed, and they were able to close those gaps before it became a problem. And it's a fantastic tool. Like to Mitch's point, if you're trying to do this and you get on an Excel spreadsheet, it's very cumbersome and people get exhausted and burned out, and then they just forget about it. But this allows you to do things in an organized way. And I've seen it, like I said, uncover some major gaps for people that they didn't even know existed. So if you do want access to the tool, feel free to reach out to me. I put my email address in the chat again, so you have that. Again, please make sure you email me because I didn't see a lot of phone numbers come through on the registration. I don't want us to not be able to get in touch with you. But with that, I'll go ahead and add one other thing. Outside of ProTech being able to help with this, we are able to also help you secure licenses, hardware. We do everything from cybersecurity to VoIP, everything that you could possibly need as a full service IT provider. So we can help you out in an area that we haven't talked about today as well. So feel free to reach out about that. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll let you get back to your day. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.